1 Corinthians chapter 15 divides into two unequal halves. In the first 34 verses that we've already discussed, which is the big half, Paul explains the demand for the resurrection of the Lord Jesus, and he amplifies the consequences for God's purpose if the resurrection isn't true, and how glad we are, of course, that it is true. Today we turn to the small half of the chapter where Paul explains the details of the resurrection of believers. We're going to read 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verses 35 to 40. But some man will say, how are the dead raised up, and with what body do they come? Thou fool, that which thou sowest is not quickened except it die. And that which thou sowest not that body that shall be, but bare grain, that may chance of wheat or of some other grain. But God giveth it a body as it hath pleased him, and to every seed his own body. All flesh is not the same flesh, but there is one kind of flesh of men, another flesh of beasts, another of fishes, and another of birds. There are also celestial bodies and bodies terrestrial, but the glory of the celestial is one, and the glory of the terrestrial is another. In setting out the details, Paul answers the two basic questions that could be asked about the resurrection. First of all, he asks, how are the dead raised up? And secondly, with what body do they come, in verse 35? In other words, how will it happen, and what kind of body will it be? He answers the second question first, verses 36 to 49, and then the first question second, in verses 50 to 58. Now, it was possibly the case that one of the arguments put forward by those who denied the resurrection was that they thought it impossible to reconstitute the decayed, or even in some cases, destroyed human body. Paul addresses this with the words, thou fool, verse 36. It was a rebuke for not thinking this through. Then he went on to describe a basic truth from agriculture. That which thou sowest is not quickened except it die, verse 36. The seed that is sown is buried. If it doesn't be buried, it will not grow. Now, in this context, die refers to the virtually inert state of a buried seed where none of the signs of life are evident and where the seed itself is destroyed in the process. That seed is sown, and unless it is allowed to disintegrate in the ground, there will be no crop. It will not come to life in the new plant. In this way, Paul establishes the fundamental principle of life from death. But here's another important point. Thou sowest not that body that shall be, but bare grain, verse 37. Although there is a link between the seed that is sown and the plant that grows, they are actually quite different. The form or the body of the plant is not put into the ground, it's just a bare seed. And this is true whatever the type of plant. God giveth it a body as it hath pleased him, verse 38. God brings out of the ground the appropriate plant with its particular body. Each seed has its own particular structure and form under the guiding hand of the Creator God. The after body is different from the before body. But different bodies is not only true of plants, it is true of other creatures. There is one kind of flesh of men, of beasts, of fishes, of birds, verse 39. There are many different types of bodies even in the natural realm, and there are different bodies for different realms. There are also celestial bodies and bodies terrestrial, verse 40. Heavenly and earthly bodies. Each of these bodies are fitted for the realm in which they dwell. Now, what Paul is showing is that in terms of the resurrected body, there is a link with the mortal body, but also a glorious difference. And how different that is, we will consider next week in the will of the Lord.